Hey, this is John. Welcome back to Modern Old School Developer. In this episode, I want to work on a subtle bug that crops up when you change the movie list selection too quickly. So, if we go select different movies, everything seems to work fine. And we can also use our arrow keys, and that also works fine. Well, I don't know. I guess I lied to you. There is no issue. Let's go back to the top of the list. Go back up. Oh no! What is that? What's going on? Obviously, I know what's going on, but that is the problem I was talking about. If you switch your selection too quickly, you can get infinite re-renders, and that is a big problem. A problem we definitely do not want. So, what is triggering that? If we go to our movie list, here is our useEffect handler that's being run whenever the value of the movie ID changes. So where does it change in here? We change movie name and series ID and series number. I don't see movie ID changed anywhere in here. Except it might be. It might be right here. Now this is supposed to spread my old values, but if we change the selection fast enough and we get more than one of these handlers running at the same time, we could have a conflict with which one is setting the value. And it may be setting a value after that value got changed, which will trigger an infinite loop. So that is kind of what the message was telling us when it warned us about a missing dependency on Formic. Now, most of the time, you can't ignore that. If you're going slow enough that it will be quick enough to run, it's not going to be a problem. But there is a dependency here. We cannot set a value that we are dependent on. That is never going to work. So, what is our solution? Well, I don't have a great solution yet, but what I'm going to do is simply take this out. But you can see we can't do that. Set values is an all or nothing proposition. You have to set all of the values for the form or just one of them. I can't set just these values, which means I need to use formic.setFieldValue instead, which I didn't want to use because if you use this, it's going to trigger a re-render for every field you change. And we're changing 5 or 6 fields. So I didn't want to do that, but we're going to have to. So let's copy and paste these, and let's go cut this data out of here. All right, need to put that over there. And then movie series ID. All right, so we can go ahead and delete all of these things now. And that should be okay. So now we will never set the movie ID inside this effect handler. Now, because of the re-renders, we're going to get a lot slower speed flipping back and forth with the arrow keys, but that's a minor thing, and it's a much worse thing to get the infinite re-renders. So I'm okay with trading that off. Let's go see that it worked. So let's go hit refresh over here. Okay, we can still flip around. That looks pretty good. And I can still use the arrow keys, and that all seems fine. And if we go on the bottom and scroll to the top, okay, you can see it's much slower now because of the re-renders, but we are not getting infinite re-renders. And we do end up on Aladdin, and I believe everything should be okay with that. Now, I think we will have a better solution once we get into Redux Toolkit, but this is good enough for now as it prevents the issue that we were seeing earlier with the re-renders. And we can even go refactor this to get rid of all of those warnings in Formic. So we have missing dependency. Well, we can fix that now because the reason I couldn't pull that out is I was using Formic values. I should have realized why that was a mistake and why you couldn't pull that out. But now that I do realize it, we can do that. So I'm updating Formic over here. So let's grab a few more things. We need set field value. We need set status. So let's get that. And we're going to need some of the values. So let's pull out values. And we'll get the movie ID, which is the only value I think that we need. And I think that should be good. So we're going to depend on movie ID. We're going to depend on set status. and we're going to depend on set field value. And if that is all correct, it should be good. So let's pull out movie ID, and let's do that. And where else do we have formic dot? All of these things here. Well, let's go ahead and remove all of those. And I think that should be good. So that looks like it ought to be good. Go back into here. No issues found. We no longer have any problems. So, you know, kind of important to listen to your compiler warnings. They're trying to help you. I didn't realize what it was saying, but there was a problem. Subtle one, but a problem. So let's go make sure that all still works. It sure looks like it's working. Little Mermaid, New Hope, Spider-Man 1, and we can flip around whenever we want. And it'll be a little bit slow to flip around, but hey, we've got scroll bars and mouse wheels and home end and page up, page down. So we've got lots of other options. We don't have to scroll with the arrow keys like this. So that should be a good solution for this problem. All right, the next thing I want to work on is adding better logging to our backend application. So all we have right now are these default UVcorn logs, which tell us some information about who's accessing the server, what they're trying to do, and the response code, as well as some cursory information about startup and shutdown. So that's nice, but I think it could be better, a bit more robust. So let's work on that. So I'm going to start over here. I want to make a new file, logging.yaml. 2 Gs will be enough, I think. YAML file, start with that little dash thing. So it's going to be version 1. There's only one version of the logging config for Python right now. And disable existing loggers, I want that to be false. We don't want to disable any existing loggers. We want to override them. So we'll start out by defining our logging formatters. This is how the message is going to look on screen or on disk. So default, which is just a name, it's not special. We have to assign the default logging formatter. So we're going to do this key here, which is the class that we are overriding. Generally, you just override the default base Python logger class, but we're going to override UVcorn's logger class, and that will let us keep some of its nice syntax highlighting. So we're going to say it is UVcorn.logging.default formatter, and the format, let's start by saying level prefix. That's going to take up 9 spaces. This is going to be this part right here, the info, warning, error, critical, etc. And that will be colored based on the criticality of the message. So it'll be yellow for warnings and red for errors and criticals, I think. And that's all based on overriding this formatting class. All right, next we're going to get the time, which is one thing I think UVcorn does not do by default, which I don't really like. So let's say it's going to be ASC time, and that's a string. I don't know what ASC time means, just means the timestamp. I'm not sure why. And then let's see here. Debating whether to add the name of the logger or not. I guess I will for now. We might take it out later. All right, and then finally, I want the message, which is an S, and that should have been a %sign. All right, that looks pretty good. So I also want the date format, and that's going to be the format of the date. So %y, %m, %d, that's year, month, date, and they'll all be 0 prefixed. And then we'll say hour, minute, second. Okay. And I believe that is going to be in 24-hour format. So that should be good. All right, we need another kind of formatter. This is the access log formatter. So we're going to override the class again. This time it's UVcorn.logging.access formatter. And our format is going to be very similar to above. We're going to start out with the prefix and the time and the name. So we'll do this right here, I'm thinking. And then what do I want to do? I want to give it the client address. Yeah, so let's give it the client address, which is a string, followed by I want this to be in quotes, just like it is in the logs here. You can see that they quote the request thing. What do they call that? Request line? Yeah. So request line, and that's a string as well. And finally, the status code, which is a string. So I think that should all be good for the format. I want the date to be the exact same date time format. All right, so I think that's it for our formatters. So let's work on our handlers. So this is how the logs are going to be sent to something, a file, syslog, standard out, standard error, whatever. So for default, the class is going to be logging.streamHandler. This is a Python class. The formatter is going to be default, and the stream is going to be sys.standarderror. So all of our logs are going to go to standard error, not standard out. All right, and then there's our access log handler, and that's going to be, I think, the same thing, actually. I guess not quite. I don't know. I took this from somebody, I don't remember who. I'll have to look it up again. Credit them for this, but basically the same. We're going to use the formatter as default, but we'll go to standard out for the access logs. Not sure. I guess it'd be better to put standard error on our logs just so we have some other place to put that. So that should be good for our handlers. So next we need our loggers. So these are what we'll actually call in Python to use our application. So let's call it movie manager. This is going to be our default logger. The level by default is going to be info, and the handlers is going to be default. So this is what we're going to handle. Our formatter is default, so that should be good. Then we have the unicorn logger, and again, level is info, and our handlers will be default. Then there are, I think these are subloggers, whatever. Unicorn.error, level info, and I think for this one we want handlers to be default. And finally, unicorn.access, level is info, and handlers is going to be access. These are our access logs. So I think that's everything. I've changed a couple of things from what I saw on there to make more sense to me, but I might have changed them incorrectly. So let's just save that and let's see what happens. So let's go ahead and stop our application, and let's say log config is logging.yaml. Okay. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. So we've got our info message over here. We've got our date and time string. It's saying unicorn.error, which, you know, honestly, I don't think I'm liking that much. So I think I may get rid of that. Let's see what the access logs look like and make sure they're okay. I'll just hit refresh to get some access logs. Okay, look like this. I see unicorn.access. So yeah, I think we're going to get rid of this. I don't think I like that at all in there. So let's just take that out real quick. Let's close this, and let's just get rid of the name there and the name there. Now this will make it difficult to disambiguate between logs from Unicorn and logs from the movie manager, but we'll see if that's a big problem. So again, I want to close this and then restart it. Yeah, I think I like that better. The main thing I don't like about the Unicorn logs is that they don't include a date and timestamp. That just bugs me. You need a date and timestamp. You just do. And I'm uncertain if I want to have the date and timestamp to be here or in the beginning. And I think I might want it at the beginning, not there, because that would be easier to sort a log if they were sorted by the time. So let's go change that as well. So let's put ASCII time here, then level prefix. So we'll switch those around. And let's just put a space in there. I think that should be all right. And let's restart it one more time. I've already got a colon right there. That's interesting. I didn't think I would have that. That must be a mistake on my part then to put that in there. So let's close that, and let's get rid of the colon. And we'll do it like that. And one more time. Yeah, okay. That will work, I think. So once again, let me go refresh the page so I get some more access logs. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. So what are we going to do about our actual application? Well, let's go set up that logging as well. All right, so just like with our default config path, we're going to say our default logging path is going to be logging.yaml. All right, we've got that now. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to be able to set up the logger. So let's make a new function, setup logging. It's going to return none. And I want to say we need a path. It's going to be very similar to this, but instead of the config path, it's going to be logging path, and not the default config path, the default logging path. There we go. There's the path to our file. So why don't we just do the same thing we did over here, pretty much just like our get config. We're going to open our path. We're going to load our data with YAML safe load. Fail to read the logging config file. And then, did I not do a standard error there? Well, that's a mistake. That should be like that. All right. And then finally, we need to do dictionary config with the data. And that comes from the logging package. So from logging, import logging.config maybe. Okay, there we go. So that should be good for that. I also want a function to get our logger. So let's make a function define get logger. It's going to return a logger, and it's going to return get logger movie manager. All right, so I need to import that. So from logging, import logger, get logger. All right. So that should all be good. So now we'll go into our main.python, and let's set up logging, same place set up our config. So let's do that right here. So set up logging. Okay, so our application now has logging in the same format as what we have from UVcorn. So let's see if we can use that somewhere. We'll just try it out right here. So logger equals get logger. There we go. And we'll say logger.info started movie manager. All right. So if we go to our command line, what did we get? Hey, looky there. Started movie manager. So there we go. We have that as an info message. You see the warning color is a warning, so that's okay. Yeah, I am starting to regret taking that name thing out because now I can't tell the difference between this and our server process messages. I don't think it'll be as bad when we're started up already because it'll be more clear, but I don't know. We might do something with that. I'll have to think about it. Let's go make some actual log messages rather than just this. So I am debating where we should put some of our messages, or what do I want to put in here exactly? One of the nice things about loggers and logging messages is if you are using a logging level that is not being employed, you won't see the message. So if I put a message trying to add an actor, I won't actually see that if we're not in debug mode. So that's kind of a handy feature of that. So if we went to here and I pushed down a little bit, let's go add another actor. So if I add an actor and I add Liam Hemsworth, we can go back to our log and you'll see we don't have any log for debug because we didn't have that in there. But if I changed my logging config and we set our logging level to debug, then we would have that. So we'll have to restart our server real quick. So let's just save this file here. All right. And now we'll add another actor. How about Dwayne Johnson? There we go. Added Dwayne Johnson. And now you can see debug, trying to add an actor. So those are the kind of things I think would be handy to put in the application. Maybe not necessarily that exactly, but it gives you a better idea of what your application is doing and when. And then you can turn on the different log levels to get the information you want. So you don't have to do things at all times, which can be very handy. So let me go add just a few things in the background, and then I will show you what I have done. All right, so here is how I have set up the logging. I've made a new function called init in config module. It initializes the logging, gets your logger and your config, and returns both of those objects. So if you make it past the init function, you should be ready to run the application. All right, so then I replaced that in main, so now our logger and our config come from here. And then one of the nice things about doing all of those exceptions from crud.py and util.py are that most of the logging can be handled right from main.py. So all we have to do is catch our exceptions and then return things when you get an exception, or log things normally. So I used debug logging for all of the standard messages. Anything you would expect to happen just gets logged as debug, because normally we don't really care about that. If you get any exceptions, they're typically logged at the warning level, which is higher priority than info, which means if you're at info level, you will still see these messages by default. But it's not actually considered an error, because we can recover from that, or at least the user could recover from that, whatever they're doing. So a duplicate entry exception, well, that's a problem on the user's end. They can recover from that. We'll log that, but we don't really need to do anything about it. That is different than when you have a path exception. A path exception is completely unexpected. We never believe this will happen. So this is an actual error. We need to log this at the error level to make sure we see that. And that's pretty much everything we did. All we have to do is I log things at the debug level that I expect to happen and I don't want to look at in the log all the time. And then all of the exceptions are warnings except for the path exception, and also the list files exception inside the import, because I expect that will work as well. So if we go to import movies, you can see that this is also an error, although it's not a fatal or critical error. It's simply going to be logged at the same level as any other path exception. Now, over in config, we do have some critical errors. Critical errors are errors we cannot recover from, and we cannot continue if we get them. So if you tried to set the logging and you couldn't, you don't have a logging config. We will not continue under those conditions. Same thing for the config file. Now, maybe I could just ignore the logging config, but I decided to make that a critical error. And same thing here. You'll notice we get logger, not get underscore logger here. This is getting the root logger because I may not have a logging configuration at this point. I probably would for config, but it's not a guarantee. It's only a guarantee if we use the init function. If I call get config by itself, I would not be guaranteed to have already set up logging, and I may not have the logger that I expect. So I'm just using the root logger here. If we don't find those files, we'll use the default Python logger, whatever that happens to be. So that's pretty much everything for logging in the main backend API. But where logging gets really important is in our rebuild script. It's kind of awkward to sit there and watch it seemingly do nothing until it just comes back to a command prompt. So I have lots of logging I've added in here. So most of that is at the info level. Although this one right here is a critical exception. If we can't list our movie files, well, we're done. We can't do anything else. That's what we call our sysexit function. Pretty much everything else is info or warning. So this one is a warning because if we couldn't load files from the link directory, that's something I would find interesting, but not important. So if we don't have that directory, Not a big deal. We can keep going. We'll just say that's a warning. Now, when you get into here, this is an error, and it may seem like it's the same thing. We're just reading a directory again. But this is actually an error because I found this directory and read files from it. Why can't I read files under there? That's more important. We'll keep going. It's not a fatal error, but it is an error. So everything else should be logged at the info or warning level, which tells us more information about the process too. So if we find a broken link file, we'll get a warning message, which should be nice. And everything else is just telling you about what it's doing at any particular time. So let's go take a look at some of the messages. So I believe I have still got this set up as debug level. So yep. So we should see a lot more information in here. So let's put this up over here. And let's go back to our application. And let's see here. What could we do? Well, why don't we remove this file over here? Let's just remove Aladdin. Yep, I'm going to remove Aladdin. All right, cool. Aladdin's gone now. So you can see in debug, it now tells you I deleted the movie Disney Aladdin with Robin Williams. Okay, Aladdin's gone now, and I got information about that. It's what I expected to happen, so we put it at the debug level. That way, I won't clutter up my log with this on normal runs. So that's the kind of messages you can expect to get with this logging now. And now we have more information about what our application is doing. So why don't we go ahead and stop this process, and let's say that we have lost our database. Oops, it's gone now. Let's see what it looks like when we go to recreate it. So let's go over here. Let's go to our backend, and let's say, let's run the movie manager.rebuild. Okay, so this becomes a lot more useful than just staring at a blank screen wondering what it's doing. It's telling you everything that it's doing. So if we go scroll back up through here, there's a lot of information on here. There's a lot. So, hey, it thinks there are some broken link files. I wonder if that's true. I'm going to have to go look at that and find out if that's true. And it might be. I don't know. But it thought we had broken link files, so I'm curious about that. Database, categories, sci-fi, Fox. Let's go look into that. Database, categories, sci-fi. Hey, there are a lot of broken links. So you can see that this probably happened when we were messing around with stuff, but I'm not really sure. So this might be telling us we have a bug in the application that I am not aware of. So something to be on the lookout for. All right, well, that's about it for logging. And I think that's it for the 1.0 release of our application. I'm going to go through and make sure this is not a bug. It's just something that happened when we were doing our updates a episode or two ago. But if it is, I will fix that and find out why that's happening, because this shouldn't happen. But we did detect that now, which is pretty nice. So good to know. All right, so I think the episode ran a little bit long. Sorry about that, but I hope you have enjoyed watching. Hope you learned something about logging and configuring logs and different logging levels. So I should have done this throughout the whole application. I wish I had done that, so it'd be a little bit more clear if I had done that. But one more thing I wanted to look at. I usually use F strings, but for all of the logging stuff that had an actual string in there, where is one of those? Here, right here. I use the old standard printf style. And the reason is that when you use an F string here, it has to evaluate that beforehand. So this is going to be evaluated every time. Now, that may not be that big of a deal, but when you run logging debug and you're not in debug mode, this entire thing will be a no-op, meaning it will take no time at all. So it's just like it's not using it in any capacity. So it is a minor optimization to use the old printf string formatting. Now there are ways to do logging classes, specialized things over that, which will let you use dot format, or I don't think you can use f string, but you can still use the dot format method. So you can do that. But the easiest way is, if you can, just stick to printf string formatting for logging messages. That is just one little micro optimization I wanted to mention. All right, that's a good wrapping up point for today's episode. I will see you next time, where I think we're going to work on Redux Toolkit. That's going to be good. Trust me. Redux Toolkit is nice. I will see you then.